Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Podcast Success Secrets. And I'm personally very excited for this interview. It's not all the time where I get to kind of be excited about what's happening in the podcast industry. A lot of it seems like, it's like a broken record. A lot of the same stuff is out there. But you have, I have a guest here, Mary, who has a lot of experience in the vocal space, voiceovers, and working in the industry for how long? You said 20 years?
I was in radio for 20 years before I started the podcasting part. Yeah.
Yes. And do you ever have an experience with like radio people being confused with podcasting?
Oh, yeah. A lot of the radio people think it's the same. I'm like, no, it's not. There's a lot of similarities, but it's very, very different.
Yeah. So if you guys are listening in this episode, we're going to be covering mainly talking about your voice and things you can do, and from what Mary's learned in her 20 years of experience that you can do to improve your voice. And then also the reason we want to do that is so we can better connect with the people on the other side, and then, have our message out there, and also making it enjoyable. Cause I don't know if you've thought of like this before, but I equated to like, if a cook has bad ingredients, they could probably cook a lot, but it won't taste as good. Right. Same with the podcast. Like if you don't have a good voice, you could probably make a lot of content, but it just won't taste as good,
Yeah, I kind of use the same analogy too. I say, okay, your podcast is like a restaurant where the menu is your podcast artwork. So people look at that and they're like, ooh, yeah, this looks good. And then the dish shows up in front of you and you start eating. You're like, well, I'm not going to come back because this was kind of subpar. And it's the same with your voice. We're like, oh, you're having the conversation, but you don't sound very engaging or friendly. Subconsciously, people might think that. And so they're like, I'm not coming back. I'm checking out. See you later.
And a lot of it happens subconsciously, right, with the listeners. And because my whole thing is, what I tell clients is, you don't want people to not think about the content and think about what's happening. Like, wait, why does it sound like that? Or why is there a cat in the background purring or something,
Yes.
Because then that takes them off the message, So, but just to dive into things quickly for people who don't know who you are, can you kind of like explain like who you are, why you're awesome, and everything you do? So
I am a podcast strategist, voice coach, and a voiceover artist. So like I said before, I worked on radio for about 20 years. And what I mainly did was produce commercials. So what would happen is a client would come into the building, a commercial would have already been written, and I get the script. But this person comes behind the mic and, they're a small business owner. They've never been behind a microphone. Pretty much the same thing as some podcasters or guests on a podcast. They don't know really what to do. And so when they're reading a script or when they're having that conversation, they're kind of flat. And so my job is to make sure that people hear all of you, not just this middle range. So a voice is kind of like music. And I want you to be heard in all pitches, in your full melody, so that people hear who you truly are and not subconsciously think, oh, because a person speaks this way and they're not really smiling, it kind of means I don't really trust you if you talk like this all the time. So with my radio experience, and I was laid off from that because all corporate jobs, everybody was downsizing, and my entire creative department got let go in 2018. And I loved listening to podcasts anyway. And so that's how this business was born, not shortly right after that, because I wanted to continue working with voices and podcasting and making sure that shows come alive. And it's just not going to be another interview show, but making it engaging with your voice.
I'm already enjoying just listening to you like speak, like how it sounds. So that's good that you walk the talk and it sounds good. So I guess one of my first questions is, because like you said, most people, when they are starting podcasting, etc., it's not what they do for a living, right? Their genius is in something else. Usually it's cerebral, has nothing to involve their voice. And when you throw in words at them, like inflections and etc., like they look at you like, what are you talking about? So like, how do you kind of like teach people, like, what are the first things you tell people, like in layman's terms, to like focus on when you're speaking or when you're podcasting to like sound good?
Right. It's about first getting out of your head. I think a lot of podcasters, they're already aware that, oh, maybe I have filler words and crutch words, and I say and oh, that's going to make me sound, people aren't going to trust me when I say that a lot. But I think it's because filler words are used when we are thinking too much ahead of ourselves. So you got to get out of your head and just be in the moment. And when you think a filler word is going to come, it's because you're trying to fill that space. So what I like to do is actually tell people to pause. And that silence is key. So that you don't have to say, and I think this is what is supposed to be happening here now. But if you have that pause, you recollect your thoughts, and then you know exactly what you're going to say. And everybody has filler words. Like, you're not going to get around that, especially in a conversation. Part of having filler words is creating that trust. Like, you need to have filler words. Otherwise, you are going to sound robotic if you edit them all out or you don't use any of them. But knowing to use them sparingly. And that's where the pause and the silence really comes into play.
That's really good advice. Even like me right now, like I know I have filler words, I have bad habits, but I think in one of your episodes you recommended, which is a good advice, to edit your own episodes in the start so you can know your quirks and what's happening, and you can listen. I think of it like a NBA player, like they watch a lot of film, or like just anyone who plays sports. That's like most of their thing is they're doing film. So I think if you're trying to be a good podcaster, you should, watch some film, listen to yourself.
And even after the fact, like a lot of podcasters, they'll publish an episode and then they never listen to it again. Right? Because they're thinking about the next one, the next episode I'm going to produce.
I think Johnny Depp did that with his movies too. You never watch his movies, but
yeah, but it's kind of like editing your own show. You need to listen back to start hearing, and not to judge yourself and not to be overly critiquing, but knowing where you are at your voice journey and knowing that, okay, this is where I am. I hear this a lot about myself. Is there something that I can do to shift that and stop doing that? Because if it's annoying yourself, it's probably annoying your listener too.
Yeah. So as far as with guest, let's say someone's starting out, like I want to think about the beginner podcaster first. And one of the biggest things I hear most is people are overwhelmed. They don't know what to say. Like, what would you recommend to someone like that? Like, should you recommend, and I know everyone's different. Everyone has different kind of things that they're going through, to like write out their episode first and read. Would you recommend to kind of like, go from the head? And if you do go from the head, what would you tell them? Because I know there's a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah, I would totally not write everything down word for word. That is a talent.
I know.
And that's why you hire voiceover artists, because they can read off the page and still make it sound like
I know some podcasts where I listen and I'm like, you're reading right now.
Exactly. I can hear it all the time. And that takes practice. So what I always recommend for podcasters is to know your story, your beginning, middle, and end. How are you going to get into the episode? And then your middle is going to be bullet points, or maybe some phrases that you want to really inject into your show, the things that you really want to pinpoint. And then your ending. How are you going to get out?
Gotcha. Yeah, bullet points, 100%. That's what I usually recommend too, because it allows you to kind of share your authentic emotion in the moment, And it's also, like you said, you're practicing. It's almost like you're building a muscle.
It is. It's this muscle. Your brain is a muscle. So you need to practice.
It's a spongy one, but
it sure is. And every episode that you create is just part of that journey. I always call it the podcasting journey, because what you do in episode 1 is not going to sound like how are you going to be in episode 20, episode 100, episode 300. You're going to learn so much along the way. So also not to be so hard on yourself when you do have the vocal tics and quirks, or I missed a bullet point, or, oh, I want to go back to this other thing. Well, you can say that in your podcast. Or if you're going to be editing it, pause, figure out, okay, that bullet point I missed. I want to get back to that. How am I going to rephrase it? Okay, this is how I'm going to start my sentence, and then go. Because you have that editing capability.
Yes. Thank God. But you don't want to do it like too much, like you said, where it sounds, I think some podcasts edit very hard. They'll even edit out the breaths. And I'm like, do you not breathe? Like,
oh, yeah, exactly. People breathe. You can lower your breath so they're not so in people's
fades.
ears. Yeah, but there's a whole editing trick to all of that too.
So what do you think the most common mistakes people make are when they're recording? At least from like a vocal, we could talk about kind of from a content perspective, but also from like how they sound. Like, like sonically, like what are they not doing? What do they need to do to like make it more appealing? Because I'm sure there's a lot of knowledge you pull from in the voiceover industry. Like tips and tricks.
One of the main things I would say first is know your microphone. So it isn't about your own instrument, your voice, but knowing how to use this piece of equipment that's right in front of your face. So knowing that if you talk, you need to be close to it, first of all. Like if anybody watching the stream now, you can see that the mics are what I like to say about 3 finger widths away, very close to your microphone. So making sure that it's not just sitting on your desk, because I've seen a lot of podcasters do that. And it's going to pick up the entire room. Yeah, it hurts. It hurts me to the
soul. It's like if you were to watch like a movie like in just 140p. Like it's just the experience isn't there.
That is the same thing. So making sure that you are close enough to your microphone, but knowing that you're not going to talk directly into it this way, because if you don't have the pop filter or a windscreen, it's going to make those plosives, and those are hard to hear and hard to edit out. So what you want to do actually, instead of talking perpendicular into your microphone, is just turn slightly to a 45-degree angle. So your mic is pointing to the corner of your lips. And that way, all the air that comes out of your mouth doesn't pass into the microphone and create that plosive, but off to the side.
Yes.
And yeah.
And you can tell when people are really intimate with their mic.
Yeah. I call it a dance too. The other thing about a microphone is you're dancing with it. So think about like a really close dance, like a tango maybe. The person's face is the microphone and you're right up close and you're about to kiss. But you're not. There's still that little
maybe
bit
if it's ASMR, maybe.
That maybe. Be part of it. But it's the same thing where when you're working the microphone, if you are laughing, you don't want to be laughing so close to the microphone. If you know you're going to be a bit more energetic and loud, you're going to move your head back and be more energetic and loud, and then move back in and be nice and soft if you really want to make your point.
Yeah. I mean, this is super important for people to understand too, because when most people get into it, like it's just what they don't think about it. Like they're not even cognizant. They just think like, I just need to talk. And then people can automatically hear me how I hear myself. But the technology is important. So
yeah.
And it kind of makes me mad, like with coronavirus happening and all these big companies like ESPN, like they had all their hosts like at home, like with webcams and like using their laptop mic. I'm like, you can't send them a good mic. Like you have a 7-figure production, like kind of made me mad. Where a lot of people still don't know. But okay. So one thing I want to cover, I'm personally interested in this because I was recently watching an episode from Joe Rogan. He had someone on who has a book called Breath. He talks about, nose breathing and kind of all the implications and effects it has on it. So what are the best breathing techniques for podcast? Is there exercises you can do, like things to like, improve how you sound or et cetera? Because I know I probably don't have the best voice ever. Like I'm interested. So.
Well, first of all, everybody has a great voice.
Yes. Unique voice.
So yeah, everyone is unique. So don't be so hard on yourself. Not just for you, but anybody listening. And so what breathing wise though, it's called diaphragmatic breathing. So if you do a lot of yoga, it's the breathing from your belly. So your diaphragm is below your lungs, right below the rib cage, but above your belly button. So if you put your hand there, when you breathe in, you want your diaphragm to expand like a balloon.
Yeah, if you're driving, use your non-driving hand.
Yep. So you're not breathing with your lungs. The most effective breathing is actually with your diaphragm. So when you're speaking, you don't want to breathe in with your lungs and fill your lungs, because then you're going to start speaking like this and speak really fast until you run out of air. And then when you run out of air, you're going to go, and then you're going to do it all over again. And then you have these giant breaths. But when you're speaking in a conversation normally, what you want to do is just have short breaths. So that's where your diaphragm comes in. So you want to just say what you want to say, have a pause, not at the end of the sentence. The pause can just be the pause of your thought. Take a little bit of a breath through your nose into your diaphragm, and then speak again. Because your vocal cords can only work if there's air coming through it. And to control your breath is to control your diaphragm.
That's
and
great.
I say breathe through your nose if you can. I myself, hard to do sometimes, mouth breather. So here's a little test for you. Take a deep breath through your mouth. How does your throat feel right now? It's a little dried out. You might want to, because that dries out your entire throat. But if you breathe in through your nose naturally has filters in there. So try that now. Take a deep breath through your nose. Do you have that same dryness in your throat?
Yeah, I got it, because it keeps the moisture, yeah.
Exactly. So breathe through your nose helps more than breathing through your mouth.
Is there any exercises you recommend people do, or just basic meditation? Or
one of the things I like to do with voice anytime before you hit record on that microphone is to make sure you are breathing and finding your vocal range. So what this is how low you can go, not really, really low, and how high you can go, but not so high that you're really straining. So when you're getting to talk and record your podcast, you're figuring out what your full range is for that day. So what I like to do is what I call the roller coaster. So think of your voice like, or an elevator. Think of your voice like an elevator. So down here where your chest is, you're going to start down here and then ride the elevator up through your throat and all the way up to the top. So this is where the roller coaster comes in. So I usually start at the bottom and you go, and if you have a vocal break in there, that's fine. It's just figuring out where, yeah, it's okay. Everyone's going to have it. But knowing how high you can go and how low you can go through your vocal cords, which again is a muscle, is you're training it right now to get into those high ranges and low ranges.
Gotcha. Just don't do it while you're recording, I'm assuming. So you're
no, this is before you hit record on the microphone.
Yeah.
And then this way too, when you're doing the you're using your diaphragm and making sure that that breath that you've taken is exhaling through your diaphragm to make that.
Gotcha. And that kind of, I guess, just opens you up a little bit and like gets you ready. Okay.
Yeah. And I do it with all the vowels. So A, E, I, O, because then it gets your mouth moving in those different shapes too.
Gotcha.
People,
what was that? People
get tongue-tied sometimes, and it's because their mouth and their lips haven't had a chance to really stretch out. And so they get tongue-tied when they're speaking sometimes. So that's another
I've noticed that when I listen to my audio. I think I need to do these exercises. So as far as, because podcasting is really, storytelling is a really crucial part of it. And I think it's very important to have your emotion come across of the moment of the story. So like what recommendations would you have for people who are storytelling and like, you know, to better communicate that message and have people experience that story?
Some of the basics I would start with is smile.
Yes, that's a big one.
Smiling helps. You cannot sound angry if you are smiling.
Yeah.
You can be loud, but if you're smiling and loud, you're never going to sound angry. So that's one thing. The other thing is to talk with your hands and your body. If you're a hand talker, like I stand all the time. I'm standing right now.
Me too.
And if you're sitting, though, sit right at the edge of your chair so that way you can still use your body, because your body conveys emotions too. And I know most podcasts, it's just audio, but your voice, the emotions come through
energy,
your facial expressions and your body movements. And then after that, this is more about your voice itself, is going back to what I was talking about, your pitch and your melody. Because your voice is an instrument, and whether it is singing or speaking, people still have a full range of melody. And that is how you get that engagement with your listener. So if you keep, like I was saying before, if you speak in 3 or 4 notes, monotone, the majority of the population speaks that way, where they don't get out of this one space in the middle. But if you think about it in terms of a keyboard or a piano, there are multiple keys, and people's voices can really stretch all those keys and be in those different pitches. And your voice gets engaged only if you use all the different melodies. So people need to be aware of their vocal range, how high they can go and how low they can go, and knowing where your middle is. So speaking in that middle range, but then going up high when you need to, if you're trying to be a bit more happy. But if you want to be more serious, going down in your range a bit more, and knowing that you would also throw in maybe some speed. So if you're going to talk really fast all the time, people are not going to pay attention to you because there is just the same speed all the time, right? You need to change it up. So sometimes what you're going to do is slow it right down. You get people's attention that way. And same also goes for when I was talking about before about pausing. Pause. It's kind of like a cliffhanger in a movie. What's going to happen next? I don't know.
It's like musicians who say kind of the space in between the notes are kind of what makes the music. A lot of classical musicians say that.
Yeah.
How much space. And I guess tempo is a thing in music as well.
Yep.
So obviously, like when you're recording, you can only think of so much at a given time. I guess that's how the brain works.
Yes.
So like, what are you trying to be most cognizant of? Is it kind of the animation and you just kind of trying to embody when you speak? Or is there other things like, is speed something you're always telling yourself, hey, check your speed, or breathe, or?
So I call it more like a toolbox. So what I have in my toolbox is pitch, melody, volume, speed, pacing. And after knowing where you are in these things, you just pull from the toolbox whenever you need it. It becomes subconscious. So in the beginning, if you're new to all of this, again, listen back to your episodes and see what you're doing all the time. So adding variety to your voice is the key. So if you know you speak really, really fast all the time and you talk like this, well, okay. Resist that urge to speak fast sometimes and just play with that and see how that works for you. It's going to be awkward. Anytime you learn any new skill, whether it be voice, whether it be podcasting, tech, knitting, sewing, cooking, whatever it is, it's always going to be awkward and you're going to have bumps along the way. But just knowing where you're at and where you want to get to.
It's a good reminder, because I don't think I've listened to my past few episodes because of that reason. Listen to yourself sometimes makes you cringe, I guess.
Well, the other thing too about your voice is how you hear it yourself is not how everyone else is hearing it. Your voice vibrates not only from your mouth, your skull, your cheekbones, but your entire body. That's how you hear yourself, because your body is its own speaker box. So by the time it comes out of your speaker, which is your mouth, it's resonating differently to different people.
I guess that's why you can hear when people smile and they speak. It's just something about it. I don't know. Can't put my finger on it.
Yeah, exactly.
You can tell.
Yeah.
Like if like someone listening in their car right now, like they're not seeing us, but like that when you were smiling and you were speaking, like you could, like if I close my eyes, I could tell.
You can't smile and say, I hate you. That's not going to happen because I'm smiling.
Oh, wait, that's
I really, 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 really hate you. No, not going to happen with the smile.
Good joke. That's what they're thinking right now.
That was a harsh one. I usually go with I love you because, again, with melody, pitch, pausing, elongation of words. If you can say, I love you in different ways, and it will mean totally different things. So if you smile with the I love you, and you don't smile and you're frowning and you say, I love you, that's different. Or if you say, I love you, so you're elongating either love or you, I love you. It creates a totally different emotion.
Yeah, I don't think people who speak English are used to that. Because I was in Thailand for like 4 or 6 months, and it's strange. In their language, they have certain words spelled the same, different enunciation, and they mean completely like they mean opposite things. Literally, like if you kind of inflex up, or if you just kind of go monotone, like it'll mean something else.
Yes. That's very common in Asian languages. My background is Cantonese, and it's a form of Chinese like Mandarin. Mandarin has 5 tones. Cantonese has 7 tones. So there's very big nuances in the way you say something, and if you say it with a slightly wrong tone, you've said something totally wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay. So that's good to know. So I'm curious, like in your experience, what was there anything you kind of struggled with when it came to kind of, podcasting or finding your voice, and like how did you kind of get over that?
You get over it by just trusting yourself. You really have to just believe in what you are saying. And when you trust in yourself and you know what your message is going to be, so you see all those bullet points, you will say these things like a fact and know exactly what it is that these listeners are going to take away from you and from your episode, that you don't have to think about, oh, am I saying it too fast? Am I saying it too slow? Do I have melody? Do I have pitch? It just comes naturally because you are so impassioned about what it is you're trying to say. So I think the confidence is knowing what you want to say and not exactly how you're going to deliver it.
Gotcha. And that probably comes with time and consistency and, just working at it. So how what do you usually recommend to people as far as amount to record, especially when they're starting out?
What do you mean by amount to record?
Like how many episodes they should like produce or like create. And should they like batch it? Should they do it like, as far as techniques?
No, like I said, it's a journey. And there shouldn't be perfectionism because nobody's ever going to be perfect. And so I would just hit record and go for it. Yeah. And then learn from that. And if you don't like it, delete it. Record another one. Yay, we have that capability.
What microphone are you using right now?
This is a Shure SM58.
Those are really good.
Yeah.
I've just been put onto them like a year ago.
They're workhorse microphones. You can drop them and they'll still work, but I never recommend dropping a microphone.
Yeah. Unless you're going through TSA, sometimes that happens. Is that an XLR type cable?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate you sharing everything and kind of offering your advice and wisdom. For people who are listening, where could they follow you, learn more about you, etc.?
I'm active on Instagram. You can find me at Organized Sound Productions. And also I have my website at organizedsound.ca.
.ca for Canada, correct?
That's right.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Mary. I appreciate you being on. And thanks for everyone watching and listening. Talk soon. See you.